Hey guys, I'm Nick and welcome back to the channel. Or if you happen to be new here, please don't forget to click that subscribe button. Today I'm talking about episode 8 of season 1 of Resident Alien, entitled The End of the World as We Know It. Very foreboding title. This week's episode kind of played out a bit like a disaster movie, which was kind of interesting. It was definitely a different pace, different dynamic to our previous week's episode, which played in most part for the drama. There wasn't a huge amount of comedy in this week's episode, and the comedy that was in this week's episode, I think, fell a little bit flat, or sort of didn't really seem to find its place properly. But let's take a look at episode 8 and see how we can break that episode down. So with the end of the previous week's episode, with Asta and Darcy and Harry falling through the crevasse into the glacier, obviously they're both all injured, they're incapacitated, and for pretty much the entire episode, these guys are trying to, get out of their predicament. Darcy's having kind of flashbacks to when she was injured in the skiing accident that she spoke about in previous episodes. And we have Harry and Asta at the bottom of the crevasse, with Harry in a very weakened state, coming back to his original alien form, which Asta finds out about. So I found this quite an interesting dynamic. Obviously, with Asta finding out that Harry is in fact an alien, there were a lot of questions. It was it played out in a very sort of serious and, emotional and touching way. All of the elements in previous episodes that would normally be playing on Harry's humorous side of being a human, this week was sort of cast aside for the very dramatic and serious situation of Harry severely weakened, injured. He's starting to bleed out, and Asta has to kind of use her nursing skills or whatever to kind of save him and to stabilize his condition so that he won't die. So there was some interesting kind of dynamics with obviously her trying to, reach inside of him and pull out something that was blocking his airway and all that sort of stuff. But most of it was, I think, sort of quite heartfelt drama between Asta and Harry. Him coming clean about his position as an alien. Although they're not completely clean, because let's face it, there would be a different outcome if he suddenly said, yep, I'm here to kind of kill the entire human race. He obviously just let Asta know, I'm just trying to find my radio so I can phone home, E.T. style. That being said, really interesting. I think this episode played out really nicely from a disaster movie standpoint. It kind of reminded me a bit of the old disaster movies, from Hollywood, your Titanics and your Vertical Limit, people stuck in the snow and falling down crevices. The B story to this episode was kind of the somewhat weird dynamic of this rivalry that kind of seemed a bit out of nowhere between Sheriff Mike and Mayor Ben Hawthorne. Obviously, Mike challenged the mayor's masculinity, and then he sort of had to kind of be rude to his wife at the restaurant by bossing her around and telling her what food to order. I think it was meant to play out humorously, but I found this B story a little bit shoehorned in, and it's sort of like, oh, well, Harry's in a serious predicament. He's dying and us has to save him, so we need it to lift the mood and have a bit of comedy in this episode. And they sort of tried to have that happen between Sheriff Mike and the mayor. But I don't think the comedy chops are really there from the mayor's perspective. Obviously, we get some comedic scenes with the sheriff. He's kind of a quirky character, very full of himself, very verbose and everything. So obviously, we've had a lot of humour from the sheriff in the past. But let's face it, I don't think there was that much humour to be had from the mayor's side of things. So I kind of found that B story kind of just got in the way a little bit of what was going on with Darcy and Asta and Harry at the bottom of the glacier. Although one interesting clue that we did get was the fact that the sheriff spotted Sam's widow coming into the restaurant with a new partner. This seems to imply that Sam was perhaps murdered by his ex-wife while she was having an affair, maybe. We obviously had a little bit of stuff going on with the government agents trying to hunt down Harry. They've obviously arrived in Patience, as we saw in the cafe with Asta's dad, and they're obviously, getting to the end of their tether in terms of trying to find Harry, and obviously at the last second, when the flyer that Max had kind of drawn up with Deputy Liv blew onto the windscreen of the van they're driving, gave them an extra sort of lead to go on. So it feels like these guys are getting close now to finding out what's going on, particularly with the scene, obviously, with Lisa and Kate in the women's bathroom at the restaurant. Obviously, the government agents are trying to locate Max, who drew the picture of Harry. So I'm guessing next week's episode is probably going to involve the government agents interrogating Max, perhaps, considering he's the one that put the flyer up. So yeah, so I think there's going to be some interesting dynamics there. But obviously the way we've left it at the end of this episode is very much tense. We've got Harry in the kitchen or in the cold room or wherever it is in Asta's father's restaurant or cafe, and they're sort of trying to do a bit of surgery and whatnot on him. His leg appears to have quite severe frostbite, although Harry did say that his planet is very freezing cold, so the cold actually does him well. So if that is the case, then I'm sort of not sure why his leg has frostbite. But I suppose it got crushed by the boulder earlier in that episode. I think when he was first fallen down the crevasse and he was on that ledge, his leg was crushed by a big ice rock. So maybe it's more of a crush injury rather than a frostbite kind of injury. So yeah, there's amputation going on there with meat cleavers in the kitchen. I wonder if this means in our next week when Harry kind of recovers, whether when he assumes Harry form, he's going to be minus a leg, or whether he's somehow able to regrow a leg or something like that. That's going to be a keen one to see how that plays out. All in all, I enjoyed this episode. It was tense. It was, there was a few moments there with Darcy hanging off the cliff and trying to rock climb up and falling down where, you held your breath and, see what was going to happen. And obviously the dynamic, I think, between, dying Harry and revealing things to Asta was interesting as well. I just think probably could have done without the sort of somewhat awkward attempt at humour between the mayor and the sheriff, which sort of, I think, just sort of seemed a bit fillerish in terms of the plot to me. Another piece of great news I noticed that Alan Tudyk tweeted just at the time of me recording this video was the fact that Resident Alien has officially been renewed for a second season. So great to see that we'll be getting a second season of this show. So that's great news for all of our Resident Alien fans out there, myself included. But what did you guys think? Did you enjoy this episode? Did it excite you? Let me know your thoughts in the comments section. Don't forget to like, to share, subscribe, check out my merchandise. Lots of cool sci-fi t-shirt themes in the merch store. They're always good to have a look at. And if you want to support the channel even more, which really helps out, you can click on that big join button to see how you can become a Sci-Finatics member. As always, guys, I will see you very soon for my next review.